Hello, everyone. I'm Sara Faust, and I'm really thrilled that you could all be here tonight. How many of you know a little bit about our company and have been to our factory? Anybody? A couple of people. Okay, great. And I know I've seen some of you before who have actually purchased pianos from us, so it's nice to hear happy stories. Some of you may not know this, so I'll give you a little bit of history about the company. Many years ago, I used to be a concert pianist. I was a soloist and played all over the world, and I was looking for the perfect piano. And at the time, I didn't have the money to go out and buy a brand new Steinway, which I thought was my ideal at the time. But what I would do is I would find a Steinway that needed work, have something done to it, and use that as a stepping stone to the next Steinway. And until this happened a number of times, until I finally got my Steinway D, and by then I knew who the better people were to do this part and that part. So I finally got a piano that worked well for me. And when we moved to Westchester from New York City, we had a separate studio on our property, and we said, hey, we have all the know-how to know how to take a Steinway and restore it. Why not continue that and become an official business? And that's how Faust Pianos was born. And we had 7 pianos in our studio there, and we've grown a little bit since then. So we now have 4 showrooms. We've recently expanded our New York showroom, and it'll stay expanded unless we come in head to head with our landlord. We'll see. We moved our restoration facility, which started out as a little shop and kept on growing, being added on to until we now have a state-of-the-art factory in White Plains, and we do tours for groups, etc. So that gives you a little bit of history. I haven't played for almost 35 years or practiced, so I no longer play, if that's one of your questions later. So what are we going to do tonight? Basically, this will be your seminar. I will answer any questions piano-related, anything that interests you. I'll try to answer. If I don't know, I'll let you know I don't know. But I'd like to give you an introduction about pianos, and specifically high-end pianos, because a lot has changed in the market. Recently, we have acquired we are now the representatives of Bösendorfer and Fazioli. And this is in addition to our previous high-end pianos of Bechstein, Yamaha CF, which is a beautiful handmade Yamaha, and of course our own Steinways. So we feel that the picture is now complete. And regarding Fazioli, it's made in Italy. It's a handmade piano, and a lot of pianists feel it's the best piano made in the world today. I went to Italy. I selected 4. We brought them in a few months ago, and we're down to 1 now, so I guess some people like it. We just acquired Bösendorfers, so the Bösendorfers you see here are very, very new for us, and before you leave, make sure you look at 2 in particular. There's one in the front window, which is called the Grand Bohemian. It's one of a kind, although they will sell them by order. It is an incredible piece to look at. Whether you like it, hate it, or absolutely fall in love with it, it definitely makes a statement. We also have another art case, which is in the front when you come in. It's also a Bösendorfer, and it was designed by the Porsche car company. It's a very contemporary piano. Have a look at it. It is also a special piano. So, I often get asked, and almost every customer who is looking for a high-end piano will ask me, which is the best piano? And the best piano can be one brand for one person and another brand for another person. It depends on the kind of music you play, what kind of pianist you are, what kind of touch you have, whether the piano is meant to be a performance piano or a practice piano, because very often they won't be the same type of piano. Very often, if you're a pianist and you want to practice at home for many hours, you might want a piano that you need to dig into, that you need to create the sound. Or you might want your ideal performance piano, where because you have a state-of-the-art instrument, anything is possible, and it's an extension of your hand. The risk, from a pianistic standpoint, of having a great piano at home is when you go to perform, unless you're performing in Europe, where the pianos are prepped much better than they are here, you're likely to get on stage in this country, and lo and behold, the piano is not what you were hoping for, and it's compared to your piano at home, you know, you're a little disappointed. Whereas if you have a piano that's not so wonderful at home, and you go on stage, and you have a lovely piano, well, you're in seventh heaven. But the advantage of having a great piano at home is that you can do anything. It gives you a much bigger vocabulary with which to work. So it's really, really a great experience. So ideally you have two. You have a piece of junk and you have your ideal practice piano. But it's really a very personal thing. So what makes these pianos different and how are they different? Each one of the high-end pianos, first of all, they're all great instruments. They're beautifully made, attention to detail. And one will say we pay more attention or the other. We did tour the factories, and from a factory standpoint, there are definitely differences. But from a pianistic standpoint, I can sort of give you an idea of how they're different. The Bösendorfer has always had, they call it the Viennese sound. It's a beautiful, very refined sound. The action is very sophisticated, and you can get nuances, and it has a very sweet, sort of ravishing sound. People who, in my mind, it's the perfect piano for classical music, early romantic music. It can handle anything, but I think that's where the forte is. It's a great chamber instrument. What's special about Bösendorfer, you may have heard of the extra keys. So the concert grand has the extra keys in the bass, and the 225, that's in centimeters, it's the 7.5-foot piano, has a few extra keys as well. And that's supposed to give it extra resonance in the bass. So, I'm sorry?
It is an extended keyboard?
Yes. They're black, so they're not, the white notes and the black notes are black, so they're not, it doesn't look like a regular keyboard. The regular keyboard stops at 88 notes, and then you have the black keys. We have two of them. We have the 225 and the concert grand, so you can look at both of them after the chat here. Fazioli. This is, Bösendorfer is old world, very traditional, very beautiful, respected all over the world. Fazioli is the newcomer. Paolo Fazioli was a pianist and engineer and came from a family of furniture makers. And it was his passion to produce the greatest piano in the world. Fortunately, he had the financial wherewithal to do that, because I can't imagine that the company makes money. We visited him in Italy in his factory, and he also invited us to a concert that was happening that night. And his concert hall is to die for. It is absolutely beautiful with fantastic acoustics. And it's not a moneymaker, but it's a passion of his. And he told me, that he's going to make a much better one soon. So how is a Fazioli different? This piano truly is much different from anything else, in that when you play it, after you play it, the sound blooms. It continues to go and it continues to grow. And it has an incredible amount of sustain. And blooming, it's like when you play it, the rosebud is still closed, and as the sound, as you wait a few more seconds, it opens up. So you can try it. We have one in the front. It's an incredible experience. It is a concert piano. You can play it very quietly. It has a very sophisticated action. But if you want it in a concert hall, that's where it really, really shines. I don't know if you saw the CBS special. There was a concert at the White House a few weeks ago, and the piano that was on stage in the White House was, lo and behold, not their American Steinway, but a Fazioli, because that's what the performers wanted. So I was very surprised to see that. Bechstein. Bechstein is an old company, handmade in Germany, and it was always considered one of the great pianos in the world. It is more like a German Steinway in that it handles the whole repertoire very, very well. You can play very quietly. You can get really big on it. It is a piano that many pianists feel very comfortable on. It doesn't have some of the specialties like Bösendorfer and Fazioli, but it is a great piano from top to bottom, beautifully prepped. In Germany, more performers play on a Bechstein than they do on a Steinway. And Bechstein is very, very common in Europe. It's not very well known in this country because there are just a handful of dealers across the country, and they don't do marketing. It's very well known in Europe, not very well known in this country. Bechstein also makes the regular Bechstein, which is not the C Bechstein, it's the concert. There's a concert Bechstein, the regular Bechstein. There's a big price difference. The regular Bechstein, I don't know why there's such a big price difference because it's so beautifully made. But it has a slightly warmer sound. It's more akin to the taste of Americans' standards. Americans often like a mellower piano, where the C Bechstein is more of a performance piano. Although we have sold Bechsteins, regular Bechsteins to concert halls, and many people have bought C Bechsteins for their homes. So I'm just giving you generalities. Yamaha CF. In around the year 2000, Yamaha came up with a handmade piano called the CF. They had a handmade piano before, which was very beautiful, but the CF, it took them about 20 years to really design it, and when it was complete, that was their golden nugget, so to speak. It has probably the most sophisticated action in the world. You think what you want to do, and it happens. It has a huge sound, but yet you can make the quietest sound on it as well, with a lot of ease. Beautiful, beautiful piano. At the last Chopin competition in Warsaw, more pianists chose the CFX than Steinway. So that is another great piano. A lot of people don't want to hear about it. They say, oh, Yamaha, I don't want a Yamaha. Yamaha has 4 different levels of pianos. Most people don't know that. But so some people associate Yamaha with being a cheap piano. It's definitely not. You know? And then Steinways, everyone knows. I can talk about differences between old ones, new ones. We could talk about market values. We could talk about what pianists are choosing today. So from here on in, I'm going to give this talk over to you, and you can ask me whatever it is that interests you. Before we do that, I'm going to show you, if you haven't been to our factory, you haven't seen this. Perhaps you have elsewhere. But, and this is an aside, this has nothing to do with the talk, but it's fun. All string instruments have a back that's curved. And similarly, the soundboard in a Steinway is curved, but you can't really see it because it's spread over such a wide area. But if you go to our factory and see the curve, there's about this much of a space between the center of the soundboard and the flatter outer rim. And the reason for this is because it helps sustain the sound, and it helps the sound be bigger. Now, I cracked my little soundboard on the way here. And I said, oh my God. So it's cracked. I don't know how it happened. It happened in the trunk of my car. So it actually did change the sound. I was kind of shocked. I said, oh, it's not going to change the sound, but it really did. So it's not going to be as dramatic as it was before, but this is fun to listen to. So this is not a soundboard. It's thinner than a soundboard, but it is soundboard material. It's spruce. And I'm going to bend it after I hit this tuning fork. So listen, and it's not as dramatic. This is what happens when a soundboard cracks. It's still very dramatic. It really amplifies the sound greatly when that board is crowned, which is why it's so important to have that crown in a soundboard. Do you want to hear it again? So there's one point at which it's amplified the most. If you go beyond that, it's too much and the sound goes down, and if you go under that, the sound goes down. So you can play around with this afterwards if you like. And I did crack the soundboard. So my belly man made this for me, and because I broke the last one when I was giving a talk somewhere else, and he said, this is a good one, don't break it. So he's going to have to make me another one now. So this conversation can go in any direction you want about anything, and if it's not piano related, that's okay too, but I might say see me afterwards. Yes?
Maybe we could start with the difference between the newer Steinways and the rebuilds of tradition.
Okay.
There's pros and cons on both sides.
Okay. So Steinway got its reputation from the Steinways from 100 years ago. The pre-war Steinways are considered the best Steinways in the world. Why? The heart of the instrument is actually the plate, the cast iron plate. Steinway used to have a foundry right next to their factory in Long Island City, and they hand cast those plates, and they were actually, they actually sent a number of them to Hamburg, because there were two Steinway factories. There's New York and Hamburg. So in the old days, a number of the New York plates were sent to Hamburg because they were considered better than what they had there. The alloys were different. We don't know exactly why, but we had an example where we had an old Steinway D, which is a 9-foot Steinway. Lo and behold, if the movers would have an accident, what piano are they going to drop? A Steinway D. And worse, it wasn't our piano. We were rebuilding it for a hall. So the plate cracked. So Steinway will not send you a plate. We sent it to Steinway, they put the plate in, and then we finished the restoration. We gave them a free refinishing, and they heard they had a new plate and new refinishing. They were thrilled. I was horrified. But anyway, when the piano was finished, it sounded like a great new Steinway, which really sent home the message to me about how important those plates were. So the Steinway foundry burnt down, I forget the year, I think in the 40s, and New York City would not let them rebuild because then, even then, when laws were much more lax, there was so much pollution being produced by the foundry that New York City said no. So they had to outsource their plates after that. You were still able to get great Steinways, to my feeling, what I know about Steinways, and I've seen thousands and thousands of them. The end of the great Steinway era ends in 1949. 1950, the sound changes. But even though the late 40s, it was after the war, the plates were not foundry plates, they still were built beautifully. I don't know why. They're different from the older ones, and there aren't a lot of them, but that's the end of the great era. So I'd say before 1950. The old plates are also very beautiful in the large pianos. They have the beaded plate. You just got one. And the woods in the rim is a little bit thicker. And the sound has a much more three-dimensional sound. It's a very soulful sound. Now, it's true that with voicing and with the kinds of hammers we use, we can make the sound brighter or mellower. And we can give it a concert sound or a home sound. But there is something about the old Steinways. It has a soul that seems not to have been the same after starting 1950. So, newer Steinways, you could break that up in different periods. So there are the Steinways of the 50s and the 60s and 70s, everybody knows, or the Teflon period. What they don't know is the bellies from the 60s and 70s were actually very well made. So I'd rather have a piano from that period than from the early 80s, for example, because they have better bellies, although we usually change the bellies. So each period had its own thing. And they started changing action parts and changing measurements and geometry. So there's no standardization with Steinway. Now, rebuilding Steinways, we don't tend to love to rebuild post-World War Steinways because the end result is just as much work, and they can be lovely, but the end result is not as gratifying to me. I mean, that's the bottom line. I'm basically quality control. So, as Susan knows, we've been through that with her piano for months and months. So, what makes the old ones special? From a pianistic standpoint, with the old ones, a pianist, unlike the new European pianos now, the older Steinways, a pianist would have to create the sound. You could play deep into the key and get a lot of different colors in it. It could have not a heavy action, a light action, but still you could really play into the key. And the more you gave, the harder you played, it kept on giving and giving and giving. With a lot of the newer pianos, I have pretty good pianists come in. One of the reasons they object to the other brands or the newer Steinways is that if they play big, there seems to be a cap above which sound distorts. And this doesn't tend to be true in the older Steinways. What's the problem with rebuilt older Steinways? It is so difficult to do it well. In our, you could talk to me about it afterwards, but the pianos that we rebuild in our factory are custom done. We have strings handmade for us. We have special soundboards. We did a lot of R&D, and we tried to recreate what was there originally. So with the action parts that we use, there are 20 different combinations, because you can't just put Steinway parts in an old Steinway and assume it'll fit well. It won't. It'll fit, you can regulate it, but it won't feel the way it was intended to feel. So you have to have all the parts in stock. We have 10 different departments, so we have our own action department. So it takes us hours, and it's a mix and match game, and until we get the parts that we're happy with. And if we're rebuilding for a pianist, they tell us what they want, and we can customize the action parts for their taste. And then voicing, Steinway has changed the way they voice their pianos. To voice a Steinway hammer is much softer than a European or Japanese hammer. And it needs a lot of work, because if you put it on a piano and listen to it, it'll sound like a soft cotton ball. It'll sound like there's a blanket over it. So you have to work with the hammer to build up the sound. There are many ways to do it. Some ways are very fast. Some ways take a very long time. I'll give you, you can leave to your imagination what Steinway is doing now and what they used to do. So it's hard to rebuild a Steinway well. And that's the problem. I have a lot of people coming to me saying, I don't want to rebuild piano, Steinway. I tried many. I tried one here and I tried one there. And I'm going, yeah, try this one. No, I don't want it. I've tried them already. And then they play it and they say, oh, but this isn't like the others. So we had an interesting experience last year. We sold a piano. Someone bought a Steinway from us for Bard College in upstate New York on the Hudson. And the faculty was thrilled because they said, okay, Steinway is finally making good pianos again. And they didn't know. And somebody told them that it was a rebuilt piano, and they said, no, it's a new one. We know. So that was interesting. But does that answer most of your questions, or do you want me to go in another direction?
It does, but it sort of leads into what is the trend now?
Okay. The trend now, Steinway has the past year, it's owned by an investment group. They're money people. And they are putting huge amounts of money into many tens of millions of dollars into marketing. And right now they're pushing their new player system, and they're pushing art cases. And I think they're going in that direction because Steinway has a very strong name, but they were losing market share to pianists who were no longer happy with the new Steinways. So they are going in a different direction. The new Steinways, you can find a beautiful new Steinway. I find that whenever we have a lot of nearly new Steinways that we get on trade. If we prep them properly, they turn out to be beautiful. Steinway does not give, I don't think, their technicians enough time to really create the best possible instrument. But I think they can do much better than they're doing. If truth be told, it's hard to find good technicians. It's really hard. So, and they have many pianos to work on. So, if they have one great voicer, that great voicer can't voice all their pianos. In our company alone, we have like 2 full-time voicers who do nothing but voicing. So it's hard to do that well. In general, the new Steinways, the sound can be very pretty. It could have a Steinway-esque sound. It doesn't generally have the 3-dimensional quality and the soulfulness that the old ones did. But it's really going in the direction of, volume. There's so much ambient noise around us every day, every moment, that piano sounds have been getting bigger and bigger with the years. So the new Steinways sound much bigger, similar to the other pianos, different personalities, but more similar to the other pianos than they used to. If you hear an old Steinway that was never touched, you would be shocked at how quiet it is, because standards have changed. So, does that, okay, yes?
Yes, ma'am. Would you ever recommend shimming the cracked soundboard on the keyboard?
There are times when it's appropriate, especially on a smaller instrument. So, just so that everyone understands that the question is, should we shim a board? And shimming happens when there's a crack in the board and it's a repair. So it depends where the piano was from. If it was from Arizona and very consistent, usually it works very well. In the Northeast, where we have the high humidities and the fluctuation, and pianos are it's really a very adverse climate for pianos. So we find when we pull the plate with an old soundboard, that crown, you have 100,000 pounds of strings pressing down. When you release it, if the piano sounded good and it needs to be shimmed, when you release that board and you restring it, you're really stressing it. And sometimes we can reset crown, but sometimes the board cannot take that stress, and when you put it back, it can lose some of the sustain. So if it's an old soundboard and somebody loves the sound of it, I say, if you want to save the money, don't change it, but don't shim it. Just leave it alone. Don't pull the plate if everything else is okay. On a big piano, I definitely wouldn't recommend it because the soundboard is too big, the stress is too great. And I can usually tell by sound if it's an old board or a new board. Now, the question is, what are you going to do if you don't shim it? Your options are leave it alone or put a new board in. And people say, oh, don't put a new board in, it won't sound the same, it won't be as good. It depends who rebuilds it. It could be true or not. So it depends on the individual circumstance. Also, is it one crack or is it 10 cracks? Are the ribs loose? Has it lost sustain? How's the down bearing? I mean, lots of different questions. So the answer is, in some cases it's fine, in some cases it's not. Yeah?
Two parts to the question. First of which, to the extent that you showed us polling on your soundboard, how much is a matter of eight-piece carved versus pressure on the sides to create the tone?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, if you were to take a piece of wood, you could carve it so that it's...
Oh, it's not carved. It's bent.
It's just the piece and then pressure is put on it.
Yes, so the way you do it is you put it in a belly press, which has the crown in it. And the ribs are on it, and it's pressed into that. The ribs keep it tight, but it's not carved. We do carve, Steinway calls this a diaphragmatic soundboard, whereas part of the soundboard is carved thinner than the rest of it. And we do that as well. And the way you do that really has a big effect on the sound, so it's important to have a great belly man. But it's bent.
And then my second question is, certainly with guitars and even the violins in the old days, the source of the spruce is very important. And I'm wondering, first of all, are the different manufacturers sourcing the spruce in different places?
Yes.
Or is it all, it states Sitka.
Steinway has always used Sitka spruce. Sitka is a place in Alaska, and you will find that Steinway boards really are inconsistent from period to period. Sometimes they're wonderful, and sometimes there's a period, I think it's in the 50s, where some of the growth rings were apparently the very good weather for trees. They grew very quick, very, very wide apart. Sometimes they were inconsistent. When we started rebuilding, we wanted to be everything like Steinway was. So we started out with Sitka. But we have switched. Our spruce comes from Northeast Canada. It's old growth trees. Now they have many different qualities of soundboards. We demand a dense, consistent grain. We will not accept wind shear, shims, knots. So it's got to be virtually a perfect board. Now, nothing is absolutely perfect, but as perfect as you can get. A lot of people, I didn't know what wind shear was. And our factory manager said, what's wrong with this board? Because we get a shipment in of boards from Canada, and then they know we want these super prime boards. They said, what's wrong with this board? And I looked at it. It says, it looks perfect to me. And they said, no, this has wind shear. And it looked like little dots. And wind shear happens when wind shear happens when there's a big wind and the tree bends over so much that the fibers break. It doesn't, so you have the tree here, it's bending over, and there's a separation of the fibers. It doesn't affect the growth rings. It's not a knot. It's not an imperfect board, but it is a compromised board because the fibers are broken. Okay? Yes?
When you say sophisticated action, could you explain what that means?
Okay, yes. A sophisticated action to me means one that is extremely responsive. So whatever you want to do in your head is translated directly into the piano. It works with you. It's not a forgiving action. Steinways from the 60s and 70s, when they had the Teflon action, a lot of pianists loved them because they were very forgiving, because you could play it in many different ways and get the same sound. If you play a CFX, a Yamaha CFX, it is wonderful for a great pianist because whatever you put in, you get out exactly. But should you play one note a little too hard or a little too light, it's gonna show that off. It actually makes you a better pianist because it makes sure that when you practice, you try to get as even as possible. So a piano that has a sophisticated action without much effort, and I don't mean weight, but I mean responsiveness. You should be able to play really quietly, and you should really be able to get a big sound and do nuances in between. It should be a dream to play.
Is it due to the mechanics of the piano, or is it the sound?
It's due to the design. Well, it's due to everything. The design is very important. People say, oh, I want a Renner action. Renner actions feel great. Well, Renner actions are different for every manufacturer. We got on trade an Altenburg piano from years ago, and I was very surprised. It said Renner inside. The action didn't feel very good, but they were actually Renner parts, but not designed in a sophisticated way. So the action parts the design has to be great, and that's where Yamaha and Fazioli and Bösendorfer, those three really take it to the ultimate degree, although they all feel different. It's
I didn't get that.
okay, Siri, I'll give you an explanation. Anyway, so it has to have a sophisticated. The design has to be great. The action parts have to be very consistent. The regulation has to be there 100%, and the voicing has to be perfect, because I have customers, after a while, they play the piano and they say, I can't play quietly anymore. Well, they're pounding in the hammer, and we have to revoice it so that when they play quietly, the sound comes out consistently. Yep.
Yeah, if I try piano in the showroom and it'll have a particular feel and a particular sound, and then if I move it to
Yes.
a different environment, my home or whatever, a different ceiling, a different
Sounds like a different instrument.
does that happen often, or?
Absolutely. I tell every one of my customers, whatever piano you get from anywhere will sound different in your home or in your concert hall. We often have to send a technician to a concert hall to revoice so that it works for that space. But acoustics are so important. If we move a piano a few inches away from a wall, it'll sound very different than if it's right up against the wall. If you turn it around 180 degrees, it'll sound like a completely different piano. Acoustic, what your walls are made of, sheetrock or cement or glass walls, they all affect, and the height of the ceilings, the shape of the walls, everything.
So then it's very confusing for a customer, right? Or how would they?
You have to pick out a piano that you like in that setting and hope for the best. We have had situations where there was one in particular, they bought a big piano, they loved it. You know, we have high ceilings. They had substandard ceilings in their home. The piano sounded dead. And there was nothing we could do. And they said, it's a faulty piano. I said, we're going to have the movers move your piano into your other room. You'll see it's not the piano. That's what they did. And they realized they had no choice. That was the only place they could keep it. But sometimes pianos sound much better. They often sound bigger or smaller, which is why it's important to have a piano voice to the space. Yes?
Do you mind talking about Bluthner? Do you know anything about
Yes. Blutner is one, it's a small German company, it's a handmade company. It's a lovely piano. It has, Blutner, each one of the pianos that we talked about has certain things about it. The Yamaha has a certain construction. The Blutner construction, most soundboards are done like on a ball principle. The Blutner is done on a cylindrical principle. And the theory behind it is that you get more clarity in the sound. The Blutner does have a very clear sound, and it has a very beautiful sound. Some people really, I mean, there are the Blutner enthusiasts, just as there are every other brand enthusiasts. So that is different. It's, you know, pianists all have different feelings about pianos. Blutner works, it's particularly, it wouldn't work so well with Rachmaninoff or contemporary music or heavy romantic. It has a very clear sound, but it doesn't blend that well. So Debussy, you can't get the wash of sound that you can get on some of the other pianos. But it's a very fine piano as well. Yes?
Can you talk a little bit about the Mason Hamlin?
Yes, I can talk a lot about the Mason and Hamlin. Mason and Hamlin, going back to the early 1900s, Mason and Hamlin and Steinway were neck and neck. It's an incredibly well-built piano. It's probably the best designed piano in the world. It has the thickest rim. It's built like a tank. It has a tension resonator system underneath, which is a spider that holds the frame together. So you can have a cracked soundboard and everything, but the crown will stay there. So the history of Mason is it used to be made in Boston. It was then sold and continued to be made in Memphis. Then it was sold again, I think, in the 60s or 70s, and it started being made in East Rochester. In East Rochester, they produced Mason and Hamlin, Knabe, and Chickering. They produced all of them the same way. So you still had the great design of the Mason and Hamlin, but they used a Pratt & Reed action, which was garbage. Their pin blocks, there was a huge space between their pin blocks and the case, so you knew they weren't going to last very long. We were Mason and Hamlin dealers. I always loved the piano, so so I actually advised them, but we had been Mason and Hamlin dealers way back because we loved the rebuilt old Masons. So I have to say that the Aeolian period, when they were made in East Rochester, is really not a great period for Mason and Hamlin. Then they were purchased by Lloyd Meyer, who was a former president of Steinway, and with a commitment to make it back what it once was. And they opened a factory again in Haverhill, and they put a lot of money into it, and were starting to do everything right, and they put so much money into it that they went bankrupt. And the piano and the company was bought by the Burgett family with the intention to continue improving it and making it into a great piano. And they did a pretty darn good job. There were ins and outs. We had a lot of beefs with them, and they they weren't that responsive to our comments. And they have recently come out with a synthetic action. It's called, having a senior moment, the composite action, which is actually a very good action. It's very consistent. And with wood being in short supply, it may be the way pianos will be going in the future. But right now, they're producing a very, very good piano. It sounds different from the old ones. Again, like new Steinway versus old Steinway, the old Steinways had more depth and warmth. The new ones are beautiful. When we get them from the factory, they need a lot of work. They don't come well prepped, but it's still a beautiful piano. Yep.
I have a question. What do you think about silent action pianos? Is there any compromise with the acoustic qualities of the piano? Is that a new trend?
Okay, there are two systems. One you probably haven't seen, and that's called the muffler system. And you could put that on grand pianos, and it's very similar to the muffler, the mute system on uprights, whereas a piece of felt comes between the hammer and the string, so it dampens the sound. So that's one thing that's getting more popular, but you're talking about the electronic silent piano.
I mean, I saw that you have a Yamaha here, which is a silent piano. I just don't know which one.
Okay, so silent piano is one where it's an electronic device where you, when you engage it, it stops the hammers from hitting the strings. You put headphones on, and you hear the piano electronically, so it enables you to play at night. Now, if you listen to a Yamaha silent piano and you feel it, it feels identical, and it's an excellent system. Bechstein and Hoffman also make an excellent silent system. The ones that are available aftermarket systems, our customers have not been so happy with them. We tell them they're not great, so it does affect the action a little bit. Not much, but the sound is not great and they're not that easy to use. So it depends which system you use. The Yamaha system is the best. It's installed as part of the piano, so you have to order it directly from the factory. We are authorized dealers for the Bechstein Hoffman, so their Vario system is excellent. It's very similar to the Yamaha. Yep.
You talked about the muffler system. Can that be installed on any piano?
Almost any piano. That brings me back to Blutner. We recently installed it on a big Bechstein, and each one is custom made for a piano. And he said, "Oh, this is such a hard piano to make," the guy who sends us the parts, because it has 5 sections rather than 4. So we had to use Blutner, a fairly new one. We sold it recently, and the customer wanted a muffler system. So we take the measurements, we send it out, and he says, "Oh, it's a Blutner, it's such a difficult piano." Because on the Blutner, one other thing that's unique about it is that it has a 4th string in the treble section that is raised, that the hammer does not hit. So it's there for extra resonance, but it also, we're going to have to custom devise the custom system for the Blutner. But it should be, yes, it's possible to do that on virtually any piano. Yep.
Can you please talk about the Yamaha hybrid piano?
Yes.
Specifically, if the tone is reacting to the technique in a similar way.
As a piano? Yes. I shouldn't say this, and if there's anyone Yamaha here, you didn't hear this. I don't love digital pianos, personally. I love the avant-grands. They're amazing. It has a real grand action in all the models. This is a digital piano that has a real action in it. So if you play it the way you would a real piano, and if you dig in, you can dig in as much as you want. And you can play it with headphones or without. It also has touch control so that you feel the vibrations of the strings. We have one out here if anyone wants to try it. Is it exactly like, does the sound exactly like an acoustic piano? No. Is it pretty amazing? Yes. Will it substitute for your Yamaha CFX? No. But if you have to practice at night and you have neighbors who are knocking on the walls, there's nothing that you can have that's better. Unless you get a silent piano.
Do you think for beginners to learn the right technique, is that piano good?
I do think so. It doesn't substitute for a great acoustic piano, but you never have to tune it. I go to so many, I know so many schools, and you go to the homes, the pianos are so out of tune, they're awful. The avant-garde never goes out of tune. You could change the pitch. It's got a lot of fun things about it. Yes?
I have a friend that has a hybrid piano and he loves it, he adores it. But when I played it, I didn't actually hear overtones, or I couldn't feel, it was
What
something
model?
quite different from an acoustic piano.
What model did your friend have?
It was an
NU1?
yes.
Okay, Yamaha makes two hybrids. I'm talking about the avant-garde hybrid. The NU1 is a hybrid because it has a real upright action, but it's not as sophisticated as the avant-gardes.
And with the other models,
You can, if you play one note, yeah, you can hear overtones. Not quite as strongly. So if you play a chord silently in the bass, and you want to hear the overtones, you play another note, you will hear them. But they're not as loud as on a real acoustic grand. But they are there. Mm-hmm. Yes?
What's your experience with the Steingräber?
Steingräber is a very lovely piano as well. It's a very small company. It's a high-end piano. It's not sold much in this country, although there are a number of dealers. It's a very fine piano. It actually has it combines some of the things of some of the other pianos together. We actually have a Steingräber, the top of the line upright here. So you can compare that to the Bechstein Concert 8 upright, and you could hear, it's not quite as sophisticated as some of the others in terms of the action, but it's a very fine piano as well. I would put it up there with the top ones. What they do is Steingräber puts so much prepping into each piano so that when it leaves the factory, it's absolutely perfect. Of course, after you play it for a while, that changes quickly. I think they used the Steinway model. They wanted to approach the old Steinway sound, and I think they got close. But if you can compare a Steingräber next to a great old New York Steinway, the Steinway will win.
How about the carbon fiber soundboards that you're using now?
The carbon fiber is not in soundboards, it's in the action parts. Soundboards are spruce.
No, the Steingräber is selling ones with carbon soundboards.
Carbon, that I'm not aware of. As of a few years ago, that was not the case, and if it is, I have no idea, and I'd like to learn about that. So that would be interesting.
Well, I don't know if this was discussed, it came in late, but I just want to know the difference between the Steinway from Hamburg and from New York.
Okay, we didn't touch on that. So there are two Steinway. We touched a little bit about the old Steinways. We have a Hamburg Steinway here, and you can actually, it's a B, and you can actually compare it with a virtually new Steinway B, and you can compare it with the rebuilt A3. I don't have a 7-foot here. We can't rebuild them fast enough. Just go back one moment and repeat your question.
Just wanted to know what was the difference between the pianos that were made here in New York.
Okay, right. So Hamburg Steinway, they actually use different action parts. They generally use the action parts made by Renner. The design of the piano is identical. The finish is polyester versus lacquer, and some people say that makes a difference. The soundboards are different, the action parts are different, the strings are different, the design is the same. So it's more of a European sound. The action on the Hamburg Steinway is not as sophisticated as on some of the other high-end brands that we discussed earlier. But it is generally, the conventional wisdom is that a new Hamburg Steinway is better than a new New York Steinway, but it's not as good as a great old Steinway if you can find one in great condition. Now we're talking about generalities. You don't buy a general piano, you buy a specific piano. And with handmade pianos, there are always exceptions. So you can find a new B that's more beautiful than a Hamburg B, and vice versa. You could try two out here. They're not the standard, but they're two examples, two very good examples of Hamburg versus New York versus all the other brands.
So you're saying that polyester is the one made in Hamburg?
Yes.
And the lacquer is
Yes.
And in terms of tone, I guess they're all individual.
Well, a Renner hammer is a German hammer. They use a Hamburg Steinway hammer. It's made by Renner. It's a much harder hammer. So a harder hammer will produce a brighter, clearer sound. And the Hamburg Steinways have that. The only piano that doesn't have that is the New York Steinway. There are many different kinds of hammers, like Bechstein is making their own hammers now. Yamaha, actually in the Yamaha CF, they're using a different kind of hammer, but they make their own hammers. So, but all of these pianos, other than New York Steinway, use a harder hammer. And that is true for the Hamburg Steinway. If you try to put a New York Steinway hammer into a Hamburg Steinway, it won't work because it doesn't give you some of the beauty that the New York Steinways have, some of that soul we were talking about, but it doesn't give you the clarity that the Hamburg Steinway is known for, so you lose out on both ends. So if you have a Hamburg Steinway and you want to change the hammers, I would definitely recommend using a Hamburg Steinway hammer. Although the reverse has been done, and it works. Yes?
My understanding is that the soundboard has a limited life.
Okay. Anything has a limited life. How limited? If you put a sound, first of all, every piece of wood is different, every worker is different. But assuming you had the same identical soundboard in two pianos, and one was in Arizona and it had humidity that was constant all year round, and the other one was in New York City or Long Island with the windows open, I can tell you right off the bat, the one in New York will have a far, 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 far shorter life than the one in Arizona. So,
What does that mean?
okay. So what happens when a soundboard deteriorates? In terms of sound, you lose sustain, especially in the treble. It loses some of the, a soundboard vibrates. If you have less vibration, you don't have as interesting a sound. Can you still always use a soundboard? Yes. I mean, you can always repair them or keep on using them as is. I mean, they don't die, but they do deteriorate. So it depends on what your standards are. The soundboard is most important for the treble. You'll get your bass to sound good with anything because it has it. But where you really need the soundboard for the extra sustain and volume is in the treble, the third register of the piano. And sustain is after you hit a note, how long does it keep on? I know you know, but some people may not. So that is often lost when a soundboard starts going downhill. Now, when you rebuild it and you repair it, can some of that be brought back? Sometimes it can, sometimes it can't. It depends on the condition of the board and who does the work. People are afraid of cracks. A crack alone won't necessarily affect the sound, although it did on my little soundboard here. That was a bad crack. I had to push it back. If you have a cracked soundboard, you might have loose ribs. That can cause buzzing. It can be indicative of other problems, but in and of itself, a soundboard that's cracked, the crack will not have the sound deteriorate. There have been studies where some researchers actually put spaces, cut out spaces in the soundboards so that, like a bridge, it will expand and contract. You know, soundboards, pianos go sharp in the summer in the Northeast because what happens is that the wood of the soundboard swells, the crown goes up, and it pushes harder against the strings. So the whole piano goes sharp. So, you know, we went back, if this happens, if this keeps on happening, the soundboard will deteriorate. But with these cracks in the soundboard, these open spaces, it didn't happen because there was room for the soundboard to expand, and therefore it did not go up and put more pressure on the strings. Yep.
A couple of years ago, there's a French piano manufacturer which is called Pleyel. Declared bankruptcy and shut down. And my question is, would you say that the piano manufacturing industry goes into a crisis? And related questions, do you see any fluctuation in the supply of demand depending on the time? And
the piano industry is in decline. A lot of companies have gone under. Schimmel was just purchased by, Schimmel is a German piano, a fine German piano. It was just purchased by Pearl River. Why? They need an infusion of cash. Bösendorfer was bought by Yamaha a number of years ago. Why? They needed an infusion of cash. Fortunately, Yamaha was very smart. They did not touch Bösendorfer in terms of manufacturing, but they were able to combine marketing and other things and personnel, but they made a decision not to touch the piano. I don't know what's going on with Petrov, but I haven't heard of Petrov in a long time. A lot of the smaller manufacturers have gone under, and when we had the recession in 2008, almost all the European, Steinway as well, all the piano manufacturers hurt, and it really knocked a lot of the smaller ones out. There is less and less of a demand for pianos in the United States, acoustic pianos. Digital pianos are doing very well. It's really sad because we have teacher recitals this time of year. We have them all over and a good number of students are practicing on keyboards or digital pianos. They're available, they're cheap, they never have to tune it, and the parents don't know that. And I say to the parents, how much money are you paying for piano lessons? You know, it's like giving, and you don't have a tool for your child to work on. It's like giving a carpenter, saying, build me this room, and here are these toys, you know, your toy saw and your toy screwdriver and toy nails, and go build it. Yeah. I think digital pianos are great in the right setting for the right needs. There are labs, and what's great about digital pianos is it brings the instrument to many people and children and schools that couldn't otherwise have pianos. And that's fantastic. So we see a growing market there. But acoustic pianos are not doing well. I have to say that we live in a bubble in New York, so the New York market is not part of the national scene. So we're not seeing a decline. But all over the United States, I don't know what is going on in Europe. But in the United States, acoustic pianos are in decline. Yes?
Could we talk about uprights for a minute?
Sure.
For that child?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Should not be playing on a digital piano.
Absolutely.
Do you have any thoughts or recommendations?
I do, and we can talk about more specifically afterwards. But in general, an upright piano, the action is vertical and the hammers hit the strings this way and not work with gravity. So the action is not going to be as responsive. Or if it is, the piano is going to be hugely expensive. If you play a Bechstein Concert 8, it's got an amazing action, and it's hard to believe that you're not playing a grand. But it's a very expensive piano. You can get a grand piano for a lot less than that. Very often uprights have problems. It depends on the brand and the condition. But uprights will have problems often with repetition and control. And although Yamaha does a pretty darn good job with an upright at a moderate price, I'm very impressed by the piano. Before we had Yamaha, when my technicians heard we're getting Yamaha, they said, "Oh no, you're getting a cheap piano." And now they're saying, "I'm amazed at the quality of this. They're very well made." So I think an upright is fine until a child reaches a certain level. On an upright, the sound also comes at you. It doesn't surround you, so it's a different experience. The action is a different experience. It can be fine for a child up to a certain level, but if they're really starting to do well, I would suggest at least a baby grand. Mm-hmm. Yeah?
Getting back to soundboards, what do you think of humidifiers? Are they effective?
The damp chaser system, we recommend it, but we also tell people it will moderate a situation. It can't take a bad situation and make it good. So if you have an environment with big variations in humidity, I suggest both the damp chaser and I think the best is altering your ambient room environment. But if you can't, it's better than nothing, but you can't expect it to overcome a really bad situation. I think you had a...
Is there, I'm so impressed with what how you describe the CFX action. Is there a big difference between the action in the CFX and the C6X?
X. Yes, first of all, in a concert grand, the keys are longer. So keys are like, I have a sample in the other room. Keys are like a seesaw. When you press down on one end, the other end goes up. So if you take 200-pound people and you put them on a short seesaw, they'll balance out, they'll be fine. But if you put them on a longer seesaw, they'll have more control. So the CFX, all 9-foot pianos, have longer keys. So you have more control. Also, yeah, the C6X is an amazing action. But the CFX is wow. You should try it. We've got one out there. And what's amazing about the CFX is that everybody, all pianists, can play fast and loud. But playing fast and quietly is much harder. So the CFX is probably the most responsive piano in the world when you have to play fast and quietly. It's there. I mean, if it's well regulated, et cetera, et cetera. So, yes?
What happened to Baldwin? When I came to New York in the 70s, every place I worked was Baldwin.
Yeah, they went bye-bye.
Did they go bye-bye?
Actually, the name did not go bye-bye. There are a couple of 3 big Asian companies, and they have bought up so many of the German and the American names. So you can still buy a Baldwin, and people buy them and say, I have a Baldwin, but it's not the same piano. It's made in Asia, and it's really a piece of garbage. But the people don't know this, that buy it. I have a Baldwin. So unfortunately, the dealers that are selling them, the people don't know. And they think they're getting a Baldwin at a great price. The old Baldwins were good pianos. They were never at the Steinway level. But what Baldwin did that was very smart and very interesting, on their 7- and 9-foot pianos, they put Renner actions that were extremely well designed, so they felt great. So pianists played them. And everybody else said, oh, this pianist is playing a Baldwin. Then they'd get a 5-foot piano. They didn't know it didn't feel the same. But at the end, Baldwin went through a number of sad steps. At one point, they were built in Mexico. Then the ones that were built at the very end, the ones that were built in this country were not very good either. But yes?
Can you talk a little bit about Daniel Barenboim's piano, and also when you see Paulini play, he always has his own piano as well. I'm assuming it's his own piano.
Yes.
So I went to see Daniel Barenboim play in a concert. I always looked at the piano and it said Barenboim. It said Barenboim on the front. And
Barenboim did invent a new piano, and I did read about it, and I heard various things about it, from it's a gimmick to it's fantastic. I haven't seen it, so I can't say anything about that. I don't know, but I know about it, but I haven't seen it myself. Yes?
French polishing,
French polishing?
Time to involved to do it properly, and do you send a technician to the residence to do that?
We don't do French polishing for a number of reasons. It is very, very time consuming, and you have to really have a very, very, very good finish to begin with in order to do a successful French polishing. Pianos were generally not French polished. That was really more of a technique for furniture. But Steinway did not use it. It was not part of the piano furniture technique. It produces a very nice patina if it's done well, but it's extremely time consuming. That's one thing we don't do. We have done it. We decided not to after we've done it. It's not worth it for us. Yes?
What do you see any kind of emerging direction or trend going in terms of preference for sound of pianos or design or anything like? What would a piano in 20 years be like, different from the ones we have?
Oh, how does it change, or what is the new trend?
In terms of trends, in terms of just what people are preferring these days, because over time things evolve. So of course
We have seen pianists are starting to move away from Steinway. And the resale market is really very, that's where you could see the trends. So the prices of nearly new Steinways has really gone down a lot. So one of our nearly new Steinways is actually we sell it for a lot less than one of our rebuilt ones. Yet the rebuilt ones sell better than the fairly new ones. But in terms of sound, the direction seems to be going for more clarity, for more brilliance. That's the trend. You still have, and the pianists that are wanting the old world Steinway sound seem to be the ones that are older pianists who have played and heard the old great Steinways, whereas the younger ones are starting to move away from that. So in the high-end market, we're seeing more of a trend towards the high-end European pianos. There's much more interest in that direction, especially Fazioli. Those, I'm sorry? Oh, you weren't here earlier. Did you come late?
I came late.
Okay, we talked about all the high-end pianos, but we've got one here. You could try it. I could talk to you about that afterwards. If there are no other questions, yes?
You've touched on all famous world pianos. What about the Stewart piano of Australia? I was there and I visited the factory. They make only two sizes, the concert grand and the 7-foot. And it's unusual, it has 4 pedals like the Fazioli.
Well, only certain Fazioli,
Yeah, the big
not
Fazioli.
the 10-foot, yeah.
And it goes right up to F in the treble and F in the bass.
I am aware of that
The unique
piano.
thing they use is steel to wrap around the bass strings, not copper.
Actually, that's interesting because steel was used in this country by Steinway during the war, World War II, when copper was in short supply. And they sounded fine. I have to profess ignorance on that piano. I know about it, but I don't know much about it. So they're not imported, as far as I know. Next time I go to Australia, I'll look them up. Where are they made in
In
Australia?
Australia, I forget the city up in the center side, like Kent, Sutton Sea, I forget the name. I have the complete Beethoven sonatas recorded on that piano. And they sound very brilliant and bright.
I can't say anything about it. Like the Barenboim piano, I haven't seen it, and I haven't read enough about it to be able to say anything one way or the other. You guys want to eat and drink? Thank you. Thank you. I hope you found this worthwhile, interesting to you. Yeah.
I just want to say that I have recently purchased a piano from the factory in White Plains. Sarah did not ask me or pay me to say this, but she was wonderful to work with and to cater whatever I wanted for my house. And the piano is lovely. It is an old rebuilt Steinway, I believe.
Steinway B from
1903-ish.
turn of the century.
And they did an absolutely gorgeous job, and I just want to
Good thing you bought it when you did, because I had someone, I think I told you.
Yeah, they were drooling over it.
They were drooling over it, and they said, "Can I buy it from her?" And yeah, once something has a sold sign on it, everyone wants it.
So anyway, I just wanted to
Thank you.
tell you that.
I really did pay her.
If I made a long outline, I also just recently bought a piano from Sarah, and I'm a beginner, and I can't tell you how happy I am with the piano, with the entire experience from start to finish, with the sales representatives, the delivery man, when the technician came, and I'm a beginner, and he spent maybe 2 hours making that piano, just dedicated to making that as good as it can be. So,
Thank you.
if anybody is in the market to buy a piano,
Thank you. I really
Sarah is
appreciate
the
that.
Rolls-Royce.
You know, I don't approach this as a business. It's really my love, and what's really important to me is to get the right piano to the right family. And it doesn't matter to me if you're looking at a $4,000 piano or a $400,000 piano, which we have up there. But you'll get the same treatment.
And psychologically, it just even further motivated me. The technician put so much work into making that piano. I said, I have to be worthy of.
So now you have to practice.
What the whole Sara Faust experience was, and lo and behold, I actually had an adult recital. We get this one.
Yay.
And whether it's your luck or not, I played very well.
Oh, I'm really glad. Thank you for sharing that.